If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with another episode of Under the Radar for you guys. And this is going to be the last episode of Under the Radar for a couple of weeks, because next week I'm going to be away on vacation, so I figured go ahead and do this Under the Radar, and then of course I got 2 reviews coming out this coming weekend for you guys to check out. But I digress. Let's get started with this week's Under the Radar for April 28th. So we're concluding April today. And the first album I want to talk about is Crimson Dawn. Not the one from South Park. With It Came From the Stars. So this is a classic heavy metal / doom metal band from Italy. And not just because of the name Crimson Dawn, because I immediately thought, oh, it's the South Park band, is it real? Well, completely different from the South Park band. Like I said, classic metal and doom metal kind of mashed together. And this album, I will say, when it comes down to trying to balance slow doom metal and classic heavy metal gallops and flares with the melody and such, it does a balance quite well. It does that balance very, very well. And like the lead work on this album, very melodic, quite feeling, little bit of shred kind of showcased here and there. And like musically, it kind of feels like a hybrid of like Candlemass, Black Sabbath, and maybe Iron Maiden a little bit. Like if Iron Maiden was a doom band, that's kind of what this is a little bit. However, I will say, while the production is great on this album and the mix is pretty solid, I will say the biggest complaint I had is that quite a few of these songs, especially in the first half of the album, kind of dragged for me. Like, it just kind of felt like they were going on needlessly a little bit. But the second half, they definitely got my attention a little bit more, and definitely got me interested in the second half of the album. The first half, you had moments, but again, it just felt like those songs kind of continued on for a little bit too long, and it does kind of ruin the flow of the album for me, and for those reasons, I give this one a 7.5 out of 10. It is a pretty solid album for my first time checking this band out. It was a pretty fun album despite my complaints, but hey, 7.5 out of 10. But now let's get into something a little more insane, and that's Ironmaster with Weapons of Spiritual Carnage. So this is a Swedish death metal band, however, this is not the Swedish death metal that you're going to think. It's not even the Gothenburg sound or the Stockholm sound. If anything, this is almost like a hybrid of like Blackened death metal and technical death metal, because there's a lot of technicality going on with this album, but a lot of Blackened riffage, like in the tremolo riffs, it gets a little bit more kind of black metal inspired, though you do get some really cool triplet chugs, some nice crawling riffs, some dissonance here and there, and the album does feel quite evil and sinister sounding. So definitely for fans of bands like Aeon, Behemoth, dare I say Vader, and Deicide, I think you'll dig this album for damn sure. I will admit though, there were some parts where some of the songs did start to kind of sound a little bit similar, but other than that, it kept my attention, again, pretty much all throughout, as it was just a freight train of aggression. And for that, I give this album an 8 out of 10. I think this was actually a pretty good album for my first time, and this is only the band's second album, and it's actually a supergroup with members of, current and former members of, like, let's see, Scar Symmetry, Edge of Sanity, Dark Funeral, among others. But yeah, 8 out of 10. Now let's get into something a little more raw and a little more sleazy, and that is Lucifuge, or Lucifuge, yeah, Lucifuge, there we go, I cannot speak today, with Monoliths of Wrath. So this is a German blackened thrash metal band, and I got interested in checking this one out because of a couple reasons. Dying Victims Productions, which last year they had a great year, at least for me, After all, Vicious Nights was top 3 for 2022, from at least in my book. But yeah, Blackened, thrash metal, and this album, raw as hell, but super fucking energetic. And the blackenedness is more in the production style, and it's kind of like a nice seasoning on top of like a raw, almost punky style of thrash metal. Kind of like, I got a lot of hints of bands like Hellripper, Midnight, a little bit of Slayer here and there, but most especially Power Trip. Like, this almost feels like if Power Trip were a Blackened thrash band, because the vocals are like almost like a Blackened version of Riley Gale a little bit, which adds to that more punky delivery, but it sounds a little more evil. But yeah, this album's very evil and sinister sounding, but slightly sleazy. That's where I kind of get a little bit of that, like, Midnight vibe, and maybe a little bit of that Hellripper vibe is in some of the more sleaziness and some of the riff work. But yeah, overall, not really much complaints really about this album. I'm giving this one an 8.5 out of 10. This is some really damn good shit right here. For Blackened thrash, if you are a fan of Midnight, Slayer, Hellripper, and even Power Trip, I think you'll like this. So April was pretty much the month for thrash. But now let's get into the final album, and that is the lone American band on this list, and that is Vadiat with Spear of Creation. I hope I pronounced the band name right. But yeah, this is a death doom band from Cleveland, Ohio, so my home state. And this I got interested in checking out because, you know, I do love me some death doom, but also on Redefining Darkness Records, which is a very great label right now, pumping out killer albums and bands. And this is a debut for this group. Although the frontman, no newcomer, the frontman I think is Brian, who also is the guitarist. He was in Mortician on a live capacity and formerly of Nunslaughter, so he's kind of a death metal veteran. But here he is doing death doom with this band, Vadiat. But yeah, this album, pretty much if you are a fan of bands like Druid Lord, Hooded Menace, Asphyx, and maybe even a little bit of early Paradise Lost, you're definitely going to dig this album. Like, this album, I would say, again, has a great balance. Here, it's like a great balance of, like, almost gothic doom atmosphere, because there is a little bit of, like, a gothic dreariness to this album, but mashes together perfectly well with death metal brutality. Like, the vocals remind me a lot of Damian Lesky from Gorgasm and Broken Hope. They're low and guttural as hell. And this album, when it comes to the lead work, there's some classic metal flair in the leads, and even in some of the riffs, they do get a little bit faster at times, like a little more groovy, and even occasionally very thrashy, kind of like Asphyx, where it's like, yeah, Asphyx, death doom, but we'll have little pockets of groove and thrash to them. But also got a lot of Black Sabbath influence in some of the riffage on here. The production and mix, I will say, is the best production and mix out of all the albums for this episode. Like, everything's perfectly audible, it still sounds natural, and even a great cover of Trouble's Pray for the Dead. They do a fantastic job making it a little bit slower, little heavier, so there you go. This album, again, I don't really have much to complain about. I give this one a 9 out of 10. I think this is up there for one of the best death doom albums of 2023 thus far. So yeah, for fans, like I said, of Druid Lord, Hooded Menace, Asphyx, and early Paradise Lost, check this out. And that does it for this week's Under the Radar. What were your guys' thoughts on all these albums? Let me know in the comments below. Albums will be in the description. And until next time, keep your horns high and your dreams wet.